All right, thank you. I feel like maybe the walk-up music should have been the Survivor theme song. I love that phrasing. And I always think it's so funny, too, that like the front is always empty. I'm like, I want to give out like bonus points or extra tickets or something to people that swarm in. But I'm excited to be here with you this afternoon. I am very hopeful that you will find some practical application and takeaways from our time together. And I'll take you back to about 7 years ago when I was in my bedroom at probably around midnight, almost in tears, sitting on the floor and just being so overwhelmed. And I'm sure many of you in this room have had that experience of overwhelm or burnout. And I was wearing so many different hats. And I'm like, man, this is more than I signed up for. And I don't know if I can keep going. I don't know if I could do this again. And when I had that, I wouldn't call it quite a bottom out moment, but a moment that I was like, Kristin, whoop, hit that same slot. Kristin, how did you get here? Have you ever asked yourself that question? You're like, how, or maybe in the middle of your workday, you're like, how did I even put myself in this position? Or how did I get here? Maybe some of your colleagues are asking themselves that question. And asking myself that question led to a whole nother level of how I saw myself, how I related to work, how I related to performance. And so for the next 25 minutes or so, we're going to talk about that exact thing. So for me, looking at myself being like, Kristin, how did I get here? I don't know if I could go again. I now have the belief that everyone in this room is vastly underestimating what they are capable of. I am vastly underestimating what I am capable of. You are vastly underestimating what you are capable of. You are vastly underestimating what your team is capable of. And this is going to help unpack some of that work together. So how many of you have heard of the 10,000-hour rule? Heard of this? Made famous by Malcolm Gladwell in the book Outliers. And the idea is, if you don't know, the idea is it takes about 10,000 hours of intentional practice to get really, really, really good at something, to become that expert level, to achieve that mastery level. So my guess actually is most, if not all of you in this room, have hit that 10,000-hour rule in the work that you're doing. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here. Now, there was another study done by Andrew Neighbor. He's an organizational psychologist, and he studied how people use their time. And so he found that we spend 100,000 hours doing one thing. Any guesses? We spend 100,000 hours of our one God-given life working. Now, I heard the small groan throughout the room, and I don't know how you feel about that, but if you really think about it, you're like, well, I do spend the majority of my time working. Even if I'm not at work, I'm often thinking about work or working at home. That was what I was doing at midnight in my bedroom. I was like, I'm still working. And this is often what can lead to that burnout or overwhelm. So if we're spending 100,000 hours of our lives working, but it takes 10,000 hours of our lives getting really, really good at something, then that begs an additional question. What do we do with the other 90,000 hours? So if you just look at this, that's 10,000 hours. Okay, I'm going to say this again, 10,000 hours to get really, really good at something. But we are working for 90,000 hours of our lives. Then what? What do we do after we're already good at what we do? And this is a question often for high performers. What do we do after we're already good at what we do? So we're going to start to look at the idea of performance and asking ourselves questions. So your life is shaped by the questions that you ask or don't ask. There's actually a phenomenon called the arrested effect, that when I ask you a question, let's say I ask you what your name is, it actually arrests your attention to the point where you have to almost fight me not to answer. Because I'm hoping and guessing that even when I said, what is your name? Like, your name actually popped in your head, because you know the answer to that question. And so that is the type of coaching that we do at Novus Global. If you haven't heard of us, Novus Global, we are an executive coaching company. We do a lot of training and facilitation in the leadership development space. We work with Fortune 500 companies, professional sports teams, organizations, government. I mean, we have over 100 coaches all throughout the US and Canada, and actually we're now moving into other countries as well, which is very fun. But the idea of the coaching that we do is inquiry-style coaching, because there is power in questions. from that exact arrested effect. And with our life being shaped exactly by the questions we ask ourselves or don't ask ourselves, I'm going to show you a model that we use to look at the idea of performance. Now, we're going to start at the bottom, and we're going to think about low performance. And the question that we ask ourselves with low performance is, what's the least I can do without getting caught? Or what's the least I can do without getting fired? Now, how many of you immediately had somebody pop in your head that fits this category? Okay, great. So you can be, now here's the thing, you can be a high performer with a low performance mindset. For instance, my sister, she's in medical sales, very successful, has been successful at every role she has had, but she will push the limits, and it's like, how long can I go without turning in my expense reports before they cut my credit card off? So it's not if we're asking ourselves this question, it's where might I be asking myself this question? What's the least I can do without getting in trouble? What's the least I can do without getting caught? So even for me, like I am not afraid to admit I am a low performer when it comes to cleaning. I really dislike it. I'm like, what's the least amount I can clean my house without feeling like it's gross or me being embarrassed? Because it's not somewhere I want to spend my energy. So looking at this question of where is it not resourceful anymore can help us sometimes spot where our blind spots are or where some of the gaps are. Now let's move on to, if we want to upgrade low performance, then we're going to move on to performance. And the question we're asking ourselves here is, how can I do a good job? How can I do a good job? Now this is middle of the road, like you don't have to be a superstar, but we're not low performers. A great example here is, I want to be a performer when it comes to driving. I for sure don't want to be a low performer. But I also don't need to be like an award-winning driver in the suburbs of North Carolina. But I want to be a good driver. It's the same thing. Where might you be asking yourself this question in your role today? Or where might your colleagues be asking themselves the question? Now, since this is kind of middle-of-the-road bland, then we're going to upgrade to, as you might guess it, high performance. Now, with high performance, we're asking ourselves the question, how can I be the best? How can I be the best? Now, when we are asking ourselves this question, there can be some problems with that. Now, for some of you, this might be the very first time that you're like, wait a minute, there are problems with high performance? Like, I thought high performance was the goal. I thought high performance was the pinnacle. We hire for high performers. We strive to be high performers, which that's not a bad thing. High performers are wonderfully productive. They're wonderful executors. They get a lot done. But there is some downside to that. Or there are some downsides. So let me see if you recognize some of these. High performers can often be overwhelmed and bored at the same time. You ever experienced that? They're overwhelmed because they have filled their plates. They're trying to keep those plates spinning. They are trying to stay on top and stay the best. But they're bored because they don't leave space for the challenge or new challenge. They're actually underestimating what they're capable of. Their potential is higher than what they're actually operating in. Now, here's another one. Have you ever, curious, in this room of people professionals, have you ever tried to give a high performer feedback? How does that go? Not well. Okay, now that's a generalization. I'm very aware of that, but it's a generalization for a reason. If you give someone feedback or offer someone feedback who is thinking to themselves all the time, how can I be the best? It actually, to some degree, can almost be an attack on their identity. It's like, well, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean I'm off on this? Like, am I not giving you enough? Our CEOs likes to joke, if you've seen the movie Gladiator, like, are you not entertained? And they can be defensive. They can brush it off. They can often be deflecting as well or blaming others. So it can be tougher to give a high performer feedback. And then third is, if they're asking themselves, how can I be the best? Or if we're asking ourselves, how can I be the best? What does that mean about everybody else around us? If I need to be the best, then everybody else needs to be lower than me, right? It's like that king of the hill mentality. Now, thankfully, at least I like to think so, people are not consciously doing this. Hopefully not in your organizations, but it's often a subconscious desire or drive, is if I need to be the best, then that means everybody else needs to be that one or two notches lower than me. This is where a lot of siloing can happen. I need to be protective of my resources. Our team needs to be the best, which means if I win, then that means you lose. Or if you win, then that means I lose. And then there's this internal battle that can keep happening with these high-performing teams. And there's a lot of potential costs to staying in silos. So what does it look like to look at these potential issues, if you will, and now that you may recognize them, it's like, oh, shoot, this is happening, and there are a lot of costs to this. I think we even talked about that yesterday. What's the cost if you don't do something about that? So, thankfully, there is another option, and that's the title of this whole talk, is what happens beyond high performance. And that's where we coined the term meta-performance. Meta comes from the Greek word meaning transformation. So you think about metamorphosis, when a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly. It's a completely different thing in and of itself. So what does it look like to transform your performance, transform your team, transform your culture, transform how you relate to performance or work? And the question we're asking ourselves here is, what are we capable of? What are we capable of? Now, if you notice the difference, the first three questions are answerable, especially if you're in sales or you have certain KPIs. Like, you know how you can be the best. You know exactly what that answer is. But what are we capable of is a question that we more answer to. It's constantly iterating. That's why it's flip. It's like a summitless peak where we get to keep getting reinvented. We get to keep getting creative to find what are we capable of. So to be able to upgrade your team, you can upgrade the one question. And it's amazing what happens when your team starts to answer to that question and look at that reinvention piece. Okay, so I'm going to give you some 3 tips or 3 tools on if this is interesting to you. How do we then, how do we morph from high performance into meta performance? Okay, first one is shift your perspective. Shift your perspective. And I'm going to give you another example or tool of this. So every single one of us in here, we have an invisible boundary around us that we like to call our intuitive fence, because it's based on our intuition, based on our past experiences, filters, memories, all of that. It's based on our intuition, and we have this invisible fence around us that everything inside the fence seems possible to us, like it's doable. And as soon as we step over that fence, it's immediately impossible. So, very practical example is, I'm going to give you an example of running. Most possible, this is like right in the middle is like your comfort zone. It's most possible, like you don't even really need to think about it. So I could probably go run a 5K today. Like, no problem, don't really need to think much about it. Then I take another step out of that comfort zone towards the fence. Let's say it's a half marathon, where I'm like, okay, like this might take a little bit more work, a little bit more training, a little bit more prep, but I can still see myself doing this, still possible. Take another step towards that fence, and the closer and closer and closer you get to the fence, your body starts to go into protective mode. This is when the excuses start coming up, the yeah buts, the what ifs, the I need from somebody, and deflecting, and you can almost feel it like you have somatic responses that happen. You feel a pit in your stomach, maybe your hands get a little sweaty if you start to say it out loud. For me, this is a marathon. Never run one before. I'm like, okay, well, what's the good timing for this? I don't know if I have time to train for it. Like, I don't know if my knees can take it anymore. I'm starting to get older. And it's just all these stories come up in our perspective around what we think is possible. But I do still think it's in the realm of possibility for me to run a marathon. Now, how many of you have ever heard of an ultra marathon? Has anybody in here ever run an ultra marathon? Okay. Then you're my people, because this thing is like 100,000 bajillion miles, I think. It is so far, and I'm pretty sure I would die. But do humans run ultra marathons? Yes, they do, many of them, and many times. It is a possibility in the realm of humanity, but it occurs to me, my perspective of myself and my capabilities is that there's no way. It is impossible. And so we get to test this with ourselves and our teams, is what occurs to us as possible versus impossible, and what is that line? What is that boundary line? So we can change our perspective, again, of what we think that we're capable of, because I'm going to give you an example that will hopefully tie this to yourselves. How many people in this room have ever accomplished something that at one point they thought was impossible? Yeah, look around. Almost every hand goes up. Your fence has expanded. You have changed your perspective on what you think is possible versus impossible. So you can continue to do that. All right, second tool. Shift your perspective, get wrong. Get wrong. Make it your practice to be wrong often. Now, what does it feel like to be wrong? I want you to think about that. Okay, oftentimes we hear it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, I sometimes feel silly, like sometimes feel stupid. But I would offer that that's not correct. Those are things that you feel when you discover that you're wrong. So what does it actually feel like to be wrong? It feels just like being right. Feels just like being right. So how often are we walking around thinking we're right when actually we're maybe missing something? We might be wrong about something. How many times are your teammates walking around thinking they're right when they might actually be wrong about something? Because we learn more from our failures and more from being wrong than we do from our successes and being right. Do you ever notice that? Because you don't like feeling those things. It's like seared into your memory when you get something wrong. So imagine how much we could learn if we get excited about being wrong. And Ed Catmull, if you don't know who that is, he was the founder of Pixar Animation, and in his book Creativity Inc., we grabbed this quote from there. Actually, if you are interested in him, our CEO did a podcast with him that is super interesting. But at any given moment, I have two assumptions. First, I'm radically wrong about something, and second, I have no idea what that is. He wakes up every single day thinking that. He is looking for where he might be wrong about something. Imagine how much more open-minded he is, how many more possibilities can pop up when you're open to being wrong versus fighting it. Because our brains love being right. We love being right about all the things we think. So if we start to train ourselves to be wrong and be excited about that, we can really start stepping more into that meta-performance. Because meta-performers love being wrong. All right, third tool. We have shift your perspective, get wrong, and get coachable. Okay? Now, I don't mean coachable in the self-promoting, we're coaches, get coaches. But what do I mean by being coachable? So this is more when you even think about, actually, most people think of when they think of coachable is yeah, I'm open to feedback. I'm open to constructive criticism. It's almost like I will allow people to speak into me. So get coachable. Now, how many of you in this room would say that you are coachable? Question number one. Okay? Okay, good amount? Great. Question two, how many of you can think of someone who is not coachable? Okay, maybe it's that low performer that popped into your mind before. Okay, question three. If that person were sitting next to you, would they have raised their hand for question number one? Probably. Okay? Which is a nice way of saying okay, maybe we're not all as coachable as we think that we are. And maybe other people aren't as coachable as they think they are. So how do we start to see that differently? So what does it mean to be coachable? We talked about that a little bit as far as that receiving piece. So I want to take that definition and put it more in this scale right here. So if 10 is super coachable and 1 is not coachable at all, we're going to put that definition of essentially allowing that feedback, allowing constructive criticism, allowing some one-on-one conversation right in the middle at that number 5. So then what does it look like to get from 5 to 10? That's when you are actively seeking it out. You are seeking out feedback. You are chasing it down. And not just from people who are easy to get feedback from. Sometimes it's fun to play with who are you actually most scared to get feedback from? That's probably going to be the most powerful feedback for your growth. So you're actively seeking it out. The fact actually that you're here is a great example. You're going to conferences. You're seeking out learning examples, maybe certifications. Maybe you're looking for a mentor. So how do I intentionally and actively seek out coaching or someone or something pouring into your life, your vision, to help you see some of those blind spots? They're called blind spots for a reason. And so some of you might even be thinking well, Kristin, how do I know if I have a blind spot if I can't see them? And people ask all the time if we can help with that. And I want to give you a resource. If it's a totally free resource, it's up to you. Maybe you could even scan this for your buddy that thinks that they're coachable, that maybe need some extra outside perspective. But this is an assessment that we have. It's a meta-performance assessment. It's going to help you see your gaps. It's going to help you see areas of, let's call them areas of opportunity, if you will, to go seek out that coaching, to seek out that help, to seek out that mentor. And it's an outside perspective to help you see that. So I'm going to take you back a bit to where some context for before I was on the floor, almost in tears, in my bedroom. So I think she mentioned I live in North Carolina now. I used to live in California. And my husband and I had a very successful career in California. We were in the top 1% of our company. So it's back to like, what do you do when you're already good at what you do? Like, we were good at what we did. And that's where my coaching and training career started. And 2 weeks before we were moving literally all the way across the country with zero backup plan, no family there, totally new space, they restructured the company. And I was losing about 95% of my income. And I was like, well, sugar, I have no idea what I'm going to do next. And this is where some of you might have found yourself in this position recently or at some point where maybe your company has gone through a reorg. Maybe there was a massive layoff and you found yourself wearing more hats than you signed up for. Maybe you've gone through acquisitions and it's totally changing the culture of your company. So I was in a totally new space, new territory, no plan and no way to navigate what was going to happen going forward. So I really started to practice what I preached in that coaching space and look at things differently. I got coachable. I followed these steps to where that's how I got connected with Novus Global. A friend of mine is a partner in the company, and I hired her as a coach. And she helped me start to see my blind spot. She helped me start to see things differently. She helped me start to snap out of that victim mentality, essentially, because I couldn't see past where I was and the emotions of where I was, to look at things differently and relate to what I was doing differently, to where now, 7 years later, I am amazed at the rooms that I get to be in. I am amazed at the people I get to help. I would never have even looked into doing the work that I'm doing, which like literally has me jump out of bed in the morning because I get so excited about the work that I'm doing. Those 100,000 hours of my life fly by because I love what I'm doing. And you can get there too. Because imagine what it would be like if your workplace, your team, started shifting their perspective and looking at things different and being open to seeing different angles of possibility. Imagine if your team started to be excited about being wrong, which I'm sure for some of you are like, there is no way that person would ever admit being wrong. But imagine if they really started doing that, what that could change. And imagine if your team, along with yourselves, started being coachable and chasing down growth, chasing down feedback, being excited about it. Because in all the organizations that we ever work with, if I could wave a magic wand, if feedback would just happen on like a constant, regular basis, it would change so much. So imagine if people started chasing that down by just simply asking one question, and that is the question of, what are we capable of? What are we capable of? Imagine what kind of workplace that would be. Thank you. All right, I'm actually going to steal this. So we actually have a little bit of time, which is great because I wasn't sure how long I would take. So we have about 6.5 minutes or so, and I would love to hear like what's coming up for you, or if there's any particular questions that you have about yourself or your team.
Blocks to getting coachable.
Okay, so just in case you didn't hear, what do I find are the people's biggest blocks to getting coachable? It does vary quite a bit. The getting wrong is interesting because it's actually a survival need that we have. There's 4 natural survival needs that we have. It's look good, feel good, be right, and be in control. So that will run our behavior quite a bit, and that being right one is strong. So people, they often don't like to see that there's anything wrong with what they're doing. And this is where we look at feedback as a gift, or another analogy is like, if you had a piece of spinach or something in your teeth, would you want someone to tell you? Like most people would say, yeah. Like, yes, please tell me I have something in my teeth. And when somebody does tell you there's something in their teeth, there might be like a little initial embarrassment, but you're like, God, thank you so much for telling me. To us, feedback is the same. If you are doing something or you are behaving in a way that is getting in the way of what you say you want, feedback is a gift to tell you that so that you could choose to do something about it. You could choose to look at that differently. And so there's a lack of openness often of people wanting to see those things in themselves. Good question. Any others? Yeah.
Talk a lot about feedback culture and something that I'm also looking into, like how do you create that culture? Do you have any tips of like how do you create that in a young workforce that's coming in, but you also have working with different generations? Do you find like there's differences between generations, and also how do you implement that and ingrain that as a culture as well?
Yeah, so funny enough, I actually don't see as many differences as people would think. The younger generations are actually very hungry for feedback. Yeah, because they're trying to figure it out, and maybe they haven't taken enough hits yet to like be jaded by feedback. But they're typically very hungry for it, and well, I'll give you another tip or tool that we have found really helpful, regardless of even personality, style, age, etc. And that is when you tie the feedback to their vision or something they care about, it's a game changer. And most times that's missing, because most times we want to give feedback based on our vision and what we want to see happen. But when you can align that to what they want, it's like their ears open up in a different way, because it's like, oh, like actually this is helpful to me, or I care about this, or it's like a what's in it for me. So whether that's their leadership trajectory in the company, so succession planning, whether it's, hey, how do you want your managers to see you, or how do you want your colleagues to experience you? So you could even ask like micro questions around their vision, but then aligning the feedback to that really has worked for everybody that we've talked to. Mm-hmm.
Up. All right, that was a great presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Question: when it comes to teams and inter-team dynamics, especially long-standing biases or thoughts around this team is right versus that team, and there's just kind of this standstill between teams, how do you address it on a team basis versus an individual?
Mm-hmm. So this can somewhat be, it's often nuanced based on like what's happening in the culture, what's the history of that, et cetera. Somebody said it, I don't know if it was yesterday or earlier today, but they made a reference of like reminding everyone that we are all on the same team. So sometimes people forget that. It's like, hey, we actually all want the same thing here. We want our company to succeed. So that could be a partial reminder. Sometimes it's looking at the influencers in each team, like who actually has the pull, who might be the loudest voices, and what might they look at. And here's even an example of that idea of meta performance versus high performance. So they actually did this study with a group of, well, I say first graders in the States. What would you say? Like same? Grade one? Grade one, thank you. And so they did this with a group of first graders, and it's like everybody, the high performance question is like, well, how do I get an A? But then the meta performance question is, well, how do we actually all get A's together? Like how do the rising tide lifts all boats? How do we all get A's together? So some of even the powerful questions I would ask is like, what does it actually look like for us to both win, or for us to all win? What might that look like? Because they might not have slowed down enough to ask themselves that question if they've been sitting in the, well, how do we win? Or how do I win? Or am I the best? Or how do we get the resources? And so they're often tunnel vision in what they're even talking about, and they're missing that bigger picture. So sometimes they even just zoom out and be like, collectively, what does this puzzle look like? Can be helpful. And I'd also sometimes look at, well, what is the company incentivizing? We're constantly teaching people how to train, or we're training people how to see us and training people how to respond to things based on how we respond. So that's another point with feedback is if you're defensive, you're training them not to give you feedback anymore. But how is the company incentivizing or training the silos? Are they actually rewarding that? Are they feeding into that? Are they tolerating that? Or is there a different way you can actually incentivize them collectively working together and winning together? All right, we have about 30 seconds left, which might not be enough for a question, but I will be around. Oh, do you have one? Is it a quick one? Okay, go.
Stand up. Okay. My team definitely has issues around failure and accepting failure, and I'm trying hard to push that and get our chiefs to acknowledge that we need to accept failure. How do I sell that to them in a way that they feel is good and not just going to promote failure?
This a couple things. There's a great book called Failing Forward by John Maxwell. There's the whole analogy of it took Thomas Edison 10,000 ways to figure out how not to make a light bulb. But it's like even talking about how much did we learn from this? What did we glean? What are the data points that we can actually use going forward? So what are we actually celebrating in that failure versus how are you talking about it? Is it all that shame-based or beating up, or like I would be probably looking at well, what is the cause of feeling like you're a failure, or what's the cause of the emotions that people might be tying to that? Because there's always underlying beliefs and assumptions underneath that. So we would probably tease that out. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and attention. I know we're at the end of the day, so appreciate you.